Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
That's right, Sherry. Hey, everybody. Each week we get to talk about how much we appreciate our sponsor support. They help make all of this happen and provide us all the technology and all the whiz-bang things to help make this bring you each episode each week. Woo! With that, thanks to Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture's been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinators. Learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor Kirsten Trainer and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2. And also check out the new 2 Million Blossoms, the podcast, also available from the 2 Million Blossoms website or from wherever you download and stream your shows. Hey, everybody, thanks a lot for joining us. We are really happy you're here. Hey, Kim, happy September.
Yeah, it's... I can see winter from here. Since last week, the weather has taken an abrupt change in my part of the world. It's suddenly cool and sunny and dry, which is odd, but I'm enjoying it. I'm glad I'm not in the south or the northeast.
That's right. I was going to say the just east of you, they're getting inundated with water, and I hope everybody is safe and without too much trouble. Living in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, New York, that's pretty rough. Hope all of our beekeeper friends are doing well.
Yes, we do. It's well, what that does, of course, with the change in seasons, Jim and I on Honeybee Obscura are going to be talking about getting ready for winter and winter packing, and coming up just out. One of the things that beekeepers run into, whether they want to or not, is because they keep bees, everybody in the world seems to think they know everything there is about other insects. And right about now, hornets and yellow jackets and bumblebees and all sorts of creatures are beginning to get big populations, and people are worried about them. So Jim and I take a look at how to handle those questions, what to do with them, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what kind of liabilities involved. And it's not as simple as it seems.
No, coincidental that you have that episode that just came out just last week. I was walking out to the barn. There's a little pathway between the house and the barn, and something thumped me in the back of the head, right square in the back of the head. And I felt that thump before. We all have. And I knew what it was, so I kept. I walked a little bit more briskly, and got into the barn, turned around, and looked, and right above my head, along the pathway, is a soccer ball sized bald-faced hornet nest.
Ooh! And
it was like, yikes. And so accordingly, I said, this is a great episode. So we got some pictures I sent to Jim too that he included in the video moment, just real quick, of that brand new hornet's nest. But I did call a outfit who collects hornets and yellow jackets for venom purposes. And they're going to come by and collect them. And if all goes well, I'll do a quick little interview with them as they collect, and we'll have it on an upcoming episode.
Oh,
here.
That'd be good. I'd watch from the house.
Well, I'm going to interview them before they do everything. I've had enough encounters with bald-faced hornets and yellow jackets that that's enough.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the fall, you have an update on the Ohio Bee Conference.
Yeah. Jerry, after a lot of a lot of hand wringing. They decided that they were going to postpone it. Travel speakers were having issues with traveling, and it just got to be a little bit dangerous, a little bit scary, and a little bit difficult to get everybody there. And so rather than try and make it work, he's just going to let it go until next year and do it again.
Yeah. Well, that's too bad. I was looking forward to that, and I'm sure everybody was. But that's the way of the world right now.
Yeah, it's not getting a lot better fast.
No. Each week, Kim, we invite our listeners to send us letters, and we've received a couple. So here's let me read a couple, and we can respond to them. The first one is we got a email from Rex, and Rex had a question about Jerry Hayes' interview last week, where Jerry is opposed. And I'll read part of his email here. It says, Jerry Hayes is opposed to vaporizing oxalic acid because it might get on the bee's antenna, which is used for smelling. Can you please refer to some legitimate research that looks at the effect of OA on honeybee antenna? So we did contact Jerry, and Jerry did provide 2 research reports. The effects of oxalic acid on Apis mellifera and sublethal effects of oxalic acid on Apis mellifera, changes in behavior and longevity. And he provided those 2 reports, and we will provide links to those studies in the show notes.
Yeah, well, Jerry, he's on the Honeybee Health Coalition and Project Apis M, and he's got his fingers in a lot of really current research. So I wasn't surprised that he had 2 references right now.
Yeah. Plus, being at the head of the classroom in the ABJ column for every month for years and years and years. So Jerry has something to say. I listened to him pretty closely.
Yep.
So the next letter, I'll let you respond to this, but this was fun. This is from David M. He says, hey, Kim and Jeff, just love the lady's voice who does the Better Bee commercial ads. Who is she, and have you considered having her on the show? I'll let you answer this one, Kim.
Well, that lovely voice belongs to my wife, Kathy Summers, who works with Jerry on Bee Culture Magazine and worked with me for years and years and years until I stepped back. But the person doing the other commercial, Jeff, and we decided to use a little bit different voice for the one that we've got now. And I tell you, when that letter came in, you made her day. So from Kathy, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dave. This is a beekeeper run operation here, and everybody's involved.
Yeah, whether you want to be or not.
Yeah, that's right. We enlist the help of everybody. Hey, Kim, we have a great series of episodes coming up. We might as well call it our nutritional series.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this because there's a lot of information coming out that, interestingly, hasn't been explored a lot until now. The honeybee nutrition people are working on, through the bee and butterfly people, what's that, Pete Berthelsen?
Pete Berthelsen.
And his job in life is to create habitat for bees and butterflies and what have you. But if you change habitat to forage, he's also doing that. So he's working to provide more food for bees out there.
It's kind of providing the foundation for nutrition.
Right. Good.
Better forage.
And then Gloria Hoffman from the USDA Bee Lab in Tucson has been working on looking at something that it's seasonal needs of bees. They eat different in the spring than they do in the fall. And how does that affect beekeeping and beekeepers, and can we fine-tune what we're feeding bees? And I think she's got some good answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And then after that, at the end of the month, we have Dave Aston and talking about his new book, Good Bees, Good Nutrition.
Yeah.
That light read.
It's a big book, and there's a lot of information, and he covers a lot of ground. I wrote a review of it in Bee Culture and covered some things, but we're going to talk to him in person, and he's going to open a lot of doors on information on what I call applied nutrition. He takes what we know and he puts it to use for the bees and beekeeper.
We have a great series of episodes coming up. And folks, we've talked about this before. If you're not a subscriber or follower of Beekeeping Today podcast, do so today. Just go up there and click on the website and subscribe, follow today, and make sure you don't miss any episodes of Beekeeping Today podcast. Coming up today, though, we do have James Webb of Beemmunity. He's taken the research that's current today on protecting honeybees and productizing it.
He's got something called microsponges. And that kind of puts an image in your head. I'm waiting to see what he's going to talk about.
Yeah, I wash the dishes every night, and I can't imagine this. No, this will be a good talk. So, folks, coming up immediately is James Webb of Beemmunity. Also, last thing before we get there, we provide transcripts of each episode. We hope that you find them useful. Let us know if you do, or if you know a beekeeper who uses the transcripts. That's important. All right, Kim, let's get on with our talk with James Webb from Beemmunity.
All right.
But first, a quick word from our friends at Strong Microbials.
Hello, beekeepers. Your honeybees face a lot of challenges out there. Unbalanced food sources from monoculture crops, holding yards, drought, food shortages, antibiotics, pesticides, and pathogens like chalk brood. To overcome these challenges, your bees need the multiple bacteria that are in all nectars, pollens, and the environment. These bacteria aid honeybees' digestion and improve your honeybees' response and resilience to pesticides. Now you can help improve your honey colony health with a quick, easy, and safe-to-use product. Strong Microbials Super DFM Honeybee uses naturally occurring bacteria to restore the healthy gut biome of your honeybees. Check them out today at www.strongmicrobials.com.
And while you're at the Strong Microbial site, make sure you click on and subscribe to The Hive, their regular newsletter full of useful information and product news. Welcome back. Right now, sitting across the virtual Zoom table with Kim and I right now is James Webb, CEO, and Nate Reid, Operations Manager of Beemmunity. Welcome, guys. Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast.
Thanks, Jeff and Kim. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's nice meeting you guys. You've got quite an interesting product here. And it was brand new to me until just very recently. So I probably know as much as most of the people listening. So I guess what does Beemmunity do?
Sure. Well, we have a product, a treatment for bees. And the idea is our treatment detoxifies any pesticides that bees consume, relieving them of those impacts that the pesticides give them.
Well, that's a powerful statement right there. Let it sink in. So how does that? At what point does that work, or at what point does the product kick in? Is it, or how long inside the bee is the pesticide there before it attaches or does its magic?
So yeah, I mean, it's quite case dependent with how the pesticide might act, and depends on the concentration at which the bee is exposed to. But our microsponges, we call them, they can be kind of integrated into a pollen patty or a sugar syrup. And the pesticides are obviously consumed and they hang around in the gut. And at the same time, beekeepers are able to feed our microsponges to the bees. And any pesticides are kind of scavenged and diverted away from, the targets, the brain and the important organs that those pesticides might impact, into the microsponges, and then they're expelled out in the stool, making sure that the bee is cleansed. And so that's kind of how it works. And we're further researching and understanding the kind of intricacies of how the interactions happen in the gut. But that's kind of the broad strokes.
The first thing right off the top that I see is it sounds like this is working when bees consume a pesticide, as in nectar, in all probability, and or perhaps pollen also?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so...
definitely oral exposure, primarily. It can solve.
Which is probably probably the avenue of greatest exposure for bees and pesticides that exists is when they are feeding on a plant that has been sprayed, and some of that spray, now it gets interesting here. What about pesticides that are absorbed by the plant? And so that's where you're going to get nectar that's got pesticide in it. What about a plant that's been sprayed with an airplane, and that spray is sitting on the surface of the flower? How does that work?
Sure. So yeah, obviously there's kind of opportunity for contact exposure there, or maybe there's some pollen which is coated with the pesticide. That pollen, might be transported back to the hive, and is a source there. But yeah, we're not entirely clear on the contact exposure protection at the moment. We're kind of still developing this product for field purposes. We've done a lot of lab studies with oral consumption of pesticides and seeing how that works. And we've got really promising data so far. But yeah, still some work to be done on the kind of contact exposure thing. So it's a good point you raised, Kim.
So the concept of a microsponge, this is interesting, and I guess for someone who isn't familiar with your product yet, what is a microsponge?
Sure, yeah. So we've developed these tiny little, I guess you can call them droplets, and they basically have an oil core, very simple core, and on the outside is kind of the key part of it. We take insect proteins, and these proteins can specifically recognize pesticides. So normally, if a human consumed a lot of these pesticides, our bodies wouldn't recognize them, and our bodies wouldn't necessarily be affected by a lot of these pesticides in the same way that insects recognize these pesticides. So we take these insect proteins, and as they recognize the proteins, the microsponges are able to actually sequester them inside the core of the microsponge, and that kind of renders them inactive, or not chemically inactive, but it renders them in a way that they can't access, their target organs of the bee. So we can basically create a fake cell, if you like, where pesticides will go into that fake cell and not attack the real cells that the bee wants to protect. So that's kind of how it works.
Interesting. I'm visualizing all the diagrams I've seen in the last 14 or 16 months of the COVID and how that it attaches and kind of visualizing the pesticide molecule and how the microsponge encapsulates that and keeps it from attaching to whatever its receptor cell is or receptor is. What about any pesticide that's already attached to its target?
Yeah, so I mean, as pesticides kind of make their way to the brain or neural cells via the hemolymph, a lot of those pesticides are going to bind. They can't be released after they bind. Okay. And so we can only really deal with things that are remaining in the digestive tract. So it's much better to be preventative rather than trying to cure this. Obviously, if a bee is getting hammered by a pesticide in the first place, it's probably not going to do a very good job of eating or functioning. So it might be too late by then. So it's really a preventative treatment.
All right. Kind of vaccine in today's terminology.
In a way, yeah.
In a way, it's definitely important to note that it's not a one-time deal. And it needs to be, reapplied. And so, we're working on the methods of application in the field trials that we're carrying out now. It's something that people will need to, use over and over again. But you're going to want to target it at times when you feel there might be pesticide application, or in lower doses over a greater period of time. But we're kind of better understanding the nature of how much you need to apply it, and what times of the year, whether it's in pollen or sugar, what works better.
So a bee needs to be constantly exposed, or not exposed. A bee needs some of this stuff in its gut all of the time, or all of the time that it's likely to run into a pesticide in its environment someplace. So if I'm near soybeans and they're going to spray, I know they're going to spray soybeans. So sometime before they spray, I apply this, I feed this to my bees, and they go out, they get exposed to it. The stuff does its job. They excrete it, and they're done spraying soybeans, so I don't have to feed it anymore. Is that basically how it would work?
That's right. And that's been a big part of what we've been trying to look into, is find out a way that our application fits in with beekeepers' timing and what they're going to be doing that time of year. So one of the first things that we looked at this year was the blueberry harvest on the East Coast, or the blueberry crop, because we know we constantly see bees coming out of there showing symptoms that look like European foul brood. And ultimately, there's really only one thing on the shelf right now that I know every beekeeper is using, and that's terramycin. So we're looking at preventative exposure. There's also the idea of overwintering. You know, if your bees are going into a cold storage, do you want to try and clean them up before they get put away? Is it just the mites that you have to worry about? So we're trying to sort of map what that exposure looks like, and then find a way that we can sort of insert this technology in a way that's going to be convenient for them with the management practices they're already doing.
Well, you bring up a good question here when you say mites, because I'm putting pesticides in my hives, or some beekeepers are putting pesticides in their hives frequently. And there are different kinds of chemicals. Some of them are not like the organic acids, but the other actual chemicals. What does that do? How does that work with? Is your microsponge sucking up my miticide?
I don't think it's sucking up the miticide. Miticides. If we're talking, I guess it depends on what treatment you're talking about, whether you're using a fume-based treatment or a contact-based treatment. Right now, we have no reason to believe that it would sort of hinder the efficacy of your mite treatment that's in there. Because it does need to be consumed. Our treatment, it's not topical. It's going to do its best work inside the gut of the bee. So there's no reason right now to believe that it would, contradict your mite treatment. But it might be something that works well to put on after you do, if you're doing 3 rounds or whatever you're using, if you're worried about that.
Well, actually, this raises a great question. We've kind of talked to it, but I'm not clear. Is this a granule powder that they consume, or is it fed as a syrup? And how does the bee ingest the product?
It can either be through a syrup or in a pollen patty. Mm-hmm. So just kind of typical beekeeping and feeds.
And so we don't keep calling it the product. What do you call this product?
We've had a few names. You might have come across. Still maybe trying to land on a good one. It's microsponges. Primarily. We had the licked brick at one point, but it was in a kind of different form at that point in time.
I wouldn't want to Google that one, really. Actually, I would probably.
But that's one of the beautiful things I see about this technology and what James sort of created, is that it is applicable in many different ways for a beekeeper. And a lot of those ways involve sucrose. And, we see sucrose in pollen patties, fondant, syrup feedings. And we're developing a powder form that's really going to sort of stand up to the test and rigors of beekeeping, keeping it in a hot room, opening the package and just kind of rolling it back together. We're working to make this thing as solid as possible.
Well, you say sucrose, I'm guessing high fructose corn syrup is equally as good?
Yeah, so we've, I'm not an expert on how high fructose corn syrup is consumed by bees relative to sucrose stuff, but we could put it in anything, quite easily.
Because that's what the commercial industry is going to be buying high fructose corn syrup as a liquid by the barrel, and so if it works equally well with high fructose corn syrup as it does with sucrose, you're okay. Okay,
yeah.
Just clearing that up to make sure.
Yeah. No, definitely. And we've primarily been testing it in pollen patties because we found that that's quite a nice way to give a boost, because you're feeding that protein source, but then you're also providing a detoxifying element as well. And so that as a kind of a standalone product might be a good option for a beekeeper, as well as, the high fructose corn syrup option.
Better Bee is pleased to sponsor today's episode of Beekeeping Today podcast. For over 40 years, Better Bee has supplied beekeepers across the country with the tools, equipment, and knowledge needed to succeed. Because many Better Bee employees are beekeepers themselves, they understand your needs and challenges and are better prepared to answer your beekeeping questions. From their colorful catalog to their support of beekeeper educational activities, including this podcast, Better Bee truly lives up to their tagline of beekeepers serving beekeepers. See for yourself at betterbee.com.
I'm going to go back to a point we already kind of looked at, but when I feed this to my bees, and I'll go back to my soybean spray, and I know they're going to spray in the next week or so I'm feeding this before they spray so that I've got it in the hive. Then when they're done spraying, how long does that continue to protect them once I feed it to them?
So in a pollen patty form, it depends if you're feeding a half pound or 1 pound and how big your colony is. So it'll go on protecting as long as it's in the hive. What we're also mapping out now and figuring out is sort of, does this end up in the honey in any significant way? And if it were to end up in the honey, one, would it be tolerable for harvesting? But two, would the bees sort of reach a threshold to where they would be exposed to it later on and get sort of a second reapplication of it? But to our knowledge, the nurse bees are going to be the first ones to sort of eat that up in the hive, and then they're not going to they're not going to take a cleansing flight until they sort of age out of the hive. So it depends on when the bee first consumes it to when they first take their cleansing flight. But if I was to hazard how many days it stays in the midgut, James, maybe you could.
Sure. Yeah, no. Yeah, well, as you're saying, I'll try and kind of summarize that a bit better. So, with a pollen patty, it might be consumed over a week or two. And then the actual microsponges are going to stay in the gut for over 2 days, probably in the area where it's going to be actively useful. So, there's a real length of exposure by doing it by a pollen patty, because that really gives you the feeding time, which is a good way of doing it.
Does it? You mentioned the nurse bees. Is it transferred to larvae, and is there any effect on the larvae as well?
Yeah, so that's been something we've been looking at. We've been kind of fluorescently tagging these things and showing that there is a transfer. We have more kind of work to do on that front to show the conclusive evidence, but sort of early data suggests that might happen, but we're not entirely sure. We can't say conclusively whether there's a health benefit yet to the larva and what that really looks like. So yeah, definitely looking more into that. We're still working with the lab at Cornell, so we'll be doing tests with the larva they've got up there, doing those larval assays. So that's another kind of exciting string to the bow that there might be.
Yeah.
I would guess that they're protected for the entire time they're in the cell because they don't defecate until just before they spin their cocoon. So if they're fed this substance, they got it made. Nothing's going to get to them. And you're telling me that it's every chemical that you're going to run into, they're protected against. So from a beekeeper's perspective, this is great. I'm not going to have any problems with my lab or my nurse bees or my larvae. And the field bees, the only issues that aren't resolved yet are contact versus eaten. So you're offering me not 100% free ride, but real close. This sounds really good.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, we're trying to be, an option which caters for all pesticide exposure, which is a real key. I think it's becoming more and more clear that the pesticide synergisms are a key contributor to a lot of hive loss, and some of those other ailments with mites can be exacerbated through pesticides. And so, we hope that we've got a pretty handy solution. And we started off through other iterations of the design where we just target organophosphates. And there's actually a publication on that recently out on that initial technology, but we've kind of moved it forward to make sure that we can cater for all the whole cocktail of pesticides that are out there. So that, a beekeeper is using it with the peace of mind that, okay, whatever's going into the hive at the time that he's treating, there's not going to be any impact there.
Yeah, I think until you can solve for contact exposure, which is something we are working on, the next best thing to do is protect the future generation, and that starts with the brood. So that's really what we're happy to see.
And just to restate, this is in the digestive system, in the gut, not in the hemolymph, is where the activity of the product, the microsponge, takes place, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's too bad this doesn't work with a fat body. We could probably help do some damage to the mites.
Hive Alive is a liquid feed supplement for honeybees, and right now is the best time to feed it to your colonies. Hive Alive contains a blend of seaweed extracts, thyme, and lemongrass, a unique formula which improves bee gut health, resulting in more bees, honey, and improved overwinter survival. Now, Hive Alive has just launched their new fondant patty, which contains the correct dose of Hive Alive, vitamins, and amino acids, and comes in easy-to-use pouches, which are great for giving to colonies over winter. Ask about Hive Alive at your local beekeeping store, or visit the website www.usa.hivealivebees.com for more information.
What have I missed on this? It sounds great. Can I get a quart someplace?
Soon. I mean, so yeah. As I said, we've transitioned out of the lab up at Cornell, where we were doing this research, and we had 80% of colonies of our little micro colonies of 50 bees. They would survive the pretty lethal pesticide exposure that they were presented with, whereas 0% of the non-treated ones survived. Based on that, we've taken it now into field trials, and we've been building that up. We've started partnering with other beekeepers, large-scale beekeepers that can kind of provide a larger-scale field trial. And over time, we're looking to gather data to say this time of year you're going to get that economic benefit, in that crop, etc. So we really want to make sure that we're transparent with the beekeepers as to what the economic benefit is of using this product. And, once we have that data, then this will be out there on the shelves. But we're very open to working with beekeepers and doing trials, selling it at kind of cost price. So yeah, it's still I'm sure we've had a lot of citizen scientists, beekeepers, approach us wanting to work with us, which is great. And so we're very willing to work with them if you do want to call early on.
I do have a question, just to follow up. You say the microsponge encapsulates the active ingredient in the pesticide, and essentially the bee poops it out later. What happens to that chemical it's just reintroduced into the environment at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, but back to where it came from, I guess, or back on the earth. Better outside the bee than in the bee.
All right.
But yeah, it does.
Yeah, the purpose is to get it out of the bee. I'm just curious. And also, if this works for honeybees, and we focus mostly on honeybees, but we we work with Kirsten Trainer on 2 Million Blossoms podcast, and we have many friends who are interested in all pollinators. This sounds like it would be a great product for native pollinators and any insect affected by pesticides. Is that true?
Definitely, yeah. So, we were doing a lot of tests with bumblebees as well. And, great results there. So, we're actually looking into ways in which we can feed this to native bees as well. And we're developing actually a consumer product for kind of your gardeners, garden owners, schools, museums, that kind of thing, in which they can feed their bees out in the wild. Because pesticides are everywhere. They're transported in our rivers. There's a lot of drift going on as well. So the whole plethora of bees can benefit from this. The key is how you actually can feed those native pollinators. Honeybees, they're pretty happy for anything you put in front of them, but the fluffier ones are a little more picky. So we're actually addressing that, and we have some pretty exciting stuff coming out in a consumer product. So if people kind of stay tuned with our social media and things, they'll see things coming up soon.
So you can go into your favorite big box store, and right next to your bottle of Weed Be Gone is your bottle of Beemmunity, and you can spray them at the same time. No, I'm being facetious.
Something like that. Not quite. Yeah, not quite. I mean, we definitely don't want to kind of encourage, pesticide use is one thing to be clear on. I think, this is definitely until a time where bees aren't affected by pesticides for, some utopia reason, then we're happy to make an impact and reduce as many insect deaths as we can. But definitely this is a way that we can curb some of the deaths we're finding without trying to encourage pesticide use.
This is really some positive news. I like the sound of all this.
I'm going to go back to the very beginning, the basics of this this microsponge, and as I understand it, you said it was a outer shell of insect protein and an inside it had an oil, and the pesticide was attracted to the outer shell of insect protein, and then it was consumed essentially or encapsulated in the oil inside. How do you produce that outer shell of insect protein?
That's a good question. Or
is this a propriety thing on that you developed?
There's aspects of proprietary things going on.
Well,
lots of mealworms.
Yeah. It's we use insect proteins, the source and the manufacture protocols. So where we have kind of a patent pending at the moment. So I'm not sure how wise it would be to fully disclose the manufacturer. But broad strokes, we take insect proteins which are easily manufacturable, and we have quite a scalable and cheap products. It's not some crazy biotechnological wizardry, and something which is very hard to produce. So it's cheap and scalable. But we use these insect proteins because a lot of these pesticides now, neonics in particular, are specifically engineered to target insect proteins. So neonics, as the example, they target some of these acetylcholine receptors in insects, and we don't have those particular acetylcholine receptors. So I wouldn't advise anyone to go and drink a load of imidacloprid or whatever it might be. But technically, it shouldn't do too much to you. But bees, it definitely does.
Okay, well, that tells me what I needed to know. That kind of leads me to another question on the protein, not how it's manufactured, but how long does it last? And that's because I'm not a microbiologist. I don't know enough about proteins. Is this going to, after some point in time, become not functional?
Yeah. So we put it in a media. We put it in sugar media, essentially, which really helps with the stability, which is really lucky because obviously bees like their sugar. So we manufacture it in a sugar media, which helps to stabilize the proteins. Sugar crystalline, in its crystalline form, has an ability to do that. So that really helps. But it's kept in a dry, stable form, which lasts long. We've been able to kind of package this up and store it away in a cool, dry place, and it's useful for a while.
So that'll have an extended shelf life.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good. Because I buy some this year and don't use it next spring, it'll probably still work. That's good. Okay. All
exactly.
right.
And for full transparency, like we've seen it can work for a long period of time. Over years, we still need to do those tests in full honesty. But yeah, it's good for a while. And we'll have more info out that
good.
One day it will be good for years.
Doesn't require super cold freezing temperatures and
no, exactly.
expire. And so, I apologize for this, guys, because I was so excited to get to the topic, because this is a really exciting topic and a great topic. But I didn't ask for either your backgrounds, both in bees and research. Before we sign off, can you, James and Nate, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves, your backgrounds and history with bees?
I'll go first, because James is going to sound a lot better than me.
I don't know about that. Not to beekeepers anyway.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. So that's been the synergy here, much like we're finding the way some of these things work out in the field. So I brought some beekeeping experience. I went to University of Maryland and worked with Galen Dively in his entomology lab and did a few seasons there. Picked up some queen rearing experience along the way. And the last 5 years, I was full-scale commercial, running migratory bees for almond production, blueberry production, and overall honey production. And that's when I found Beemmunity in New York, and I came on board.
Very good.
Very modest summary, Nick. But he's really, kind of changed our understanding of how this works, and just the combination of industry and research experience has kind of brought us on a long way. So props to Nate for sure. But yeah, from my side, I kind of graduated over here in the UK. I'm currently over in the UK, but based in America these days. But graduated in the UK, and I spent some time actually working for an insect feed startup. So someone came up with the idea of producing insect feed to feed animals. So I have a bit of entomology experience, but then started my master's over at Cornell University in upstate New York. And I worked in a biomaterials lab there. And I kind of came up with this idea that we could potentially detoxify pesticides within a bee. For some reason, my professor thought it was a good idea, and gave me funding to kind of pursue that idea for a couple of years. And so we had a small team out there, and we were collaborating with the entomology lab at Cornell. And we did a few different designs where we would detoxify pesticides, in a test tube, and then see what would work in a bee. We had some success. We got a publication in the journal Nature Food. And then after I graduated, I thought, well, this could potentially be useful for beekeepers. Let's try and license this thing and get it out there. So we're still in early days of the company having been formed and taking this thing to market. But we're adamant we're going to do so. And so hopefully good things to come. But it really just came from a small idea and a very, I guess, open-minded professor. So Professor Marr at Cornell, thank you very much for believing in all this.
Fantastic. That's really exciting.
Well, Cornell has quite a history with being interested in bee research with Roger Morris and Nick Calderone. So you fit right in there.
Yeah, exactly. They've got a lot of bee expertise there, and a lot of the professors that we spoke to there, Professor Scott McCart, notably, they really helped the kind of collaborative effort, and I think that's kind of what has really helped with our success, because the pesticide problem is a chemical problem, and it's not one that can be easily solved by entomologists alone. It kind of really requires a collaborative effort. I think that's kind of a really handy thing that we've managed to introduce by breaching some of those gaps. We've come up with a novel solution, which is different to most things out there.
Is there anything you'd like to mention we haven't asked about yet?
So I will have to say, we had some enormous help through some of other commercial beekeeping outfits, who responded to our calls and were willing to answer questions. and let us work with their bees and sort of poke around. So I just want to give a big thanks to Merrimack Valley Apiaries and Harvey's Honey in New Jersey, because they were a big help. And it's not always easy to sort of accommodate your schedule when you have people coming in, that don't really know what you're doing or what your schedule is, and having to sort of help accommodate. So that was a big help.
Fantastic.
You found two good outfits to work with out there.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, I think the only thing to add is, we're seeing promising results, but this is biology, and things take a while to prove out, with conclusive results. And so, we're working hard behind the scenes to kind of make sure that this is a very crystal clear. The benefits are crystal clear. It's also research that hopefully sets a grounding for future research to come, advancing the field. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, I want to invite you. I know it's difficult at times to find an avenue to communicate your successes and any kind of announcements, but you're always welcome to reach out to us. We'd be happy to have you back on. We also have the audio postcards. So if you don't really want to be a full hour of an interview and you just want to send us a quick audio memo, we can do that too for our listeners to give us an update. So we'd love to have you back and hear how the product is going, and look forward to product launches. What, next spring, next fall?
Yeah. So next spring, definitely we hope to have kind of a first iteration out, off the back of the rest of the research this year. So yeah, stay tuned.
Good.
Where would I go look for information?
So our website, beemmunity.co. That's 2 E's and 2 M's in beemmunity.co. And there's plenty of information out there, or definitely feel free, anyone to reach out. You can email us, all the information's on there. So it would be great to talk to anyone who's got interest.
And we'll have your links on the website.
Yep. Good. Well, this is great. I'm looking forward to being able to use this product, and I'm glad you are going to make it available to the industry. It's something that it's a Band-Aid on a big bleeder, and I hope it helps a lot. It sounds like it's going to. So for your work, thank you.
So
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff and Kim. That was great.
Pleasure talking with you both.
I'm ready to go out and buy some of that. If there was some at the local bee store, I'd be buying some Beemmunity microsponges.
Yeah, and I'm anxious for this product to be ready. It's going to help a lot of beekeepers, I think. The good side of this is that there's a Band-Aid to put on the pesticide problem. The bad side of the problem is that there's still a problem, and there's still pesticide being put into the environment, way more than we need and way more kinds than we need. I'm glad these guys have solved part of the problem for bees and beekeepers, and it's going to make life better for all of those. But there's still too much poison out there.
I agree. So I'm looking forward to hearing from them coming up in the future, hearing about all the continued research for some of the questions we had that they didn't quite have the answers yet. But I think they are on to something really good.
I think so. I'm pleased to see that this product will be available next spring, and it's not going to solve all the problems, but it's going to really help a lot on one of them.
The one thing I will say that James was he was admittedly a little, shy about talking about was, the protein base for the insect protein. And my first thought was, boy, I hope they're not importing those Asian giant hornet larvae into the Pacific Northwest.
I think you had, what was it? You said mealworms?
Mealworms, yeah.
I mean, they raise those by the ton for chickens.
Yeah.
So, chickens, it's candy for chickens. This is a good use to mealworms, I think.
We digress. So it was excellent couple guys. I look forward to hearing from them in the coming months. Yes, I do too. And again, thanks guys for being here with us and telling us about this product. Look forward to having you back. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let other beekeepers looking for a new podcast know what you like. You can get there directly from our website by clicking on reviews along the top of any web page. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support for the Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. We also want to thank Strong Microbials for their support of the podcast. Check out their full probiotic line at www.strongmicrobials.com. We also want to thank Better Bee for joining us as our latest supporter. Check out all of their great beekeeping supplies at www.betterbee.com. And finally, and really most importantly, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on the show. Feel free to send us questions and comments to questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else, Kim?
No, next time I'll have a couple of book reviews for you, though, Jeff. I've been doing a lot of reading this summer. It's been too hot to work outside, so I'm enjoying the time inside.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, Kim. Thanks a lot. Take care.
You too.